sheet that he sent me, and it's got a list of a ton of things. Can I just read off and ask questions? I actually want to ask you about Chrome extensions because I'm like nerding out on Chrome extensions right now. Have you ever even made one?
I've bought one. So we have one right now.
You have one. So on here, so I tweeted out, so this is a mutual friend of ours, by the way, but I can't say who it is. They were considering buying a company, and it was a Chrome extension, and it was two people who were doing $25 million a year in sales with their Chrome extension. It's pretty crazy. And then Grammarly, you know Grammarly?
Yeah.
Grammarly, I think, is like a $20 billion company at this point. Grammarly does like 800 million in revenue.
That is what I like, these sleeper ones that people kind of just like don't really consider.
Grammarly is the best, man. It started by this guy named Max, I think he's from like the Ukraine, and lives in Canada, and he's a hardcore engineer. And I asked him at HustleCon, the backstage, like that they had bootstrapped it, and they raised a funding. They raised $100 million at $1 billion valuation. And I was with them backstage, and I was like, dude, that's amazing. So you're like almost a billionaire now. He goes, yeah, it's pretty cool. Like the business is way bigger than no. And he smirked, but he was real low key. He's like, yeah, it's cool. The business is way bigger than most people realize. Like it's going to be huge. And it was awesome. So Grammarly's a good business. What's your Chrome extension?
Leo.io.
What's it do?
So it's kind of similar to that Momentum one, which I think is pretty popular. It's the main one. When you open up a tab, it has like a nice background. I think that taking a step back on these Chrome extensions, I think what's interesting about your tweet, which was like, this Chrome extensions make 25 million, or these, is what are things that not everyone else is paying attention to that you can acquire for not a market rate? Like, I think ultimately that's how you can have a lot of success in business, but that's specifically for marketing, a lot of what I look for. So when we launched sumo.com, I actually bought probably about 5 million installs, I think give or take 5 million installs of WordPress plugins. So I bought like some of the most popular WordPress plugins around.
No way. Which ones?
I mean, I have to pull up our list now, but the biggest one was Google Analytics. So it was like a 1 million person install. Yeah. So it was Google Analyticator. We bought WP Fonts. We bought Construction Page. So basically,
dude, I used WP Fonts. I used a bunch of those.
Yeah. So we scraped the thing that it's not just copying this, because now people are more aware of it. But what you're looking for is like, one, can you get structured data? So we went to the WordPress directory and you could get all their rankings. So I got all the rankings, and then I sorted it by ones that were not updated recently. So I said, which ones had the most installs that no one's taking care of? And I would just email them and say, hey, you haven't taken care of it. I'll pay you for it. And because there's not a market for it, you can get a cheaper price. And then I just sent a blast email to a lot of these people and picked up millions of installs. And that drove a significant amount of sumo.com.
Did you even pay more than 6 figures for any of them?
For the Google Analytics one, they had 1 million installs. I paid $100K.
Wow, that's crazy, isn't it?
That was the most expensive one. I could pull up my price.
Could that Google? So for the people listening, WordPress. If you don't use WordPress is used by like 3/4 of the internet, or half of like the top 10,000 websites, and they have this like crazy database of all types of apps that you could use or plugins. It's amazing. And Sumo was a email capture plugin.
Yeah, man, I found our list. We had a lot of. I bought all-in-one favicon, just a bunch of random ones, and then we would rebrand them and then cross promo to sumo.com within WordPress. And I was thinking I would do the same. And the thing is there's not like these websites where people are buying and selling them, and a lot of these guys weren't monetizing. It was just hobbies. And so I think in marketing and business, you got to look for something that's a problem that other people haven't identified. And that's also why I bought the Chrome extension. I bought it for, I bought it for 25,000 for 40,000 installs, active installs on Chrome. But with that one, we could not monetize it at all. We tried like paid features. We tried ads to it. We tried to grow it. And we were not as successful. So I pretty much lost almost all the money on that one.
How much? What's the CPM on ads for a Chrome plugin? Do you know?
I don't remember what it was, but it was abysmal. And it wasn't something that we were able to grow dramatically like I thought we could. Like the WordPress stuff was really cheap. Like we were getting that stuff super cheap back in the day.
That's crazy. There's this guy.
Like I think
there's this guy who I bet you know, who you definitely know. I think his name's Syed. What's his name? Syed. His last name starts with a B.
Syed Balki.
And he owns this thing called Awesome. What's it called? It's called Awesome Corp or something.
He owns WP Beginner. He's like the WordPress underground mafia. He owns a lot of WordPress blogs.
And let me explain the story that I know it as. So basically, he's young. I think he's from Pakistan, and he's only like 28 or something, or 29. And he started this thing called WP Beginner, which is a site on WordPress. So if you like how to install blank on WordPress, he'll show up number one. It gets like 5 or 10 million uniques a month, a ton of uniques a month. And using his blogs, he would see which plugins would get the most installs. So he would say like, here are all the best like forms for WordPress, or here's all the best like font plugins for WordPress. And he would just see which are the best. He would buy the best ones and then just promote them extra hard on WP Beginner. And at this point, I bet you he makes $50 million a year on all of his WordPress stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I love these industries that like everyone's sleeping on. Like, I think that WordPress stuff is really interesting. It probably is still a decent category. What's fascinating though is the other side of this, Sam. So I actually try to do the same strategy in Shopify apps. So I went over to Shopify and we were launching Sumo.com on Shopify. And I was like, man, I'll just go buy all these people over there. What was interesting was that a lot of the people on Shopify were a little bit more savvy and they had recurring revenue. So they were like, we want 10x the price, where like 10x the price of their revenue. Where the WordPress plugins, they weren't really making money. So I was like, hey, I'll pay 1 cent for every active install you have. So I was getting them for very, very cheap. But the Shopify ones, like I literally couldn't buy almost any.
So our friend Andrew Wilkinson bought a couple of them and he rolled them up and eventually took it public. And it's public on the Canadian Stock Exchange right now, probably for $600 million market cap. It's called WeCommerce. And they do like, I think $30 million a year in revenue just off Shopify apps.
The Shopify ecosystem was interesting. I mean, it's interesting if you can create something really easily and other people can copy you really easily. And then you don't control the payments. It was a whole wild experience in there because Shopify controls all the money. You don't. You have to wait for your grandpa to give you your nickels, and they control the whole thing. So we were like, let's get the hell out of this world. But yeah, WeCommerce looks like 535 Canadian, which is what, like 100 million American?
No, not that bad. Yeah, like what's the conversion of Monopoly money to USD?